DG. Dutch, how about some Ron Wright stories while there in Smoky Mountain Wrestling? Also in Memphis, the time Jimmy Hart dumped a bag of flour over Lance Russell. Seems like Lance was really upset with that. Thank you.
I don't think that was planned.
Which one's that? The flour over the head?
The Lance Russell thing. I think he just did that. And I think Lawler, because Lawler liked to rib anyway. And he talked Jimmy, I think, into going out and dumping the flour over Lance's head. Of course, Jimmy said, I didn't mean to do it. It was just, I forgot the top was open or something. And that's how they got, of course, Lance didn't believe that, of course, but it was actually great on TV. You see Lance walking around with flour on his head. What was the other part of your question?
Oh, well, before we do that, let's talk about Lance Russell. Was he always getting ribbed by people?
No, not really. I hit Lawler a lot because they were friends, and they were friends a long time for Channel 5. I think Lance was at another station, and I think that's when Memphis was owned by two guys. It was owned by Nick Gulas, and Jarrett had he was the son of Teeny Jarrett. She worked in the office for years. And then it come time, Lawler and Jarrett saw how much money they were drawing and how much money they were making through their work, because they booked that end. And they decided to pull apart from from Nick, and start their own. And it was the greatest move both of them ever did. Because I think Jarrett, just out of him, just his one ownership, his part ownership in Memphis, sometimes he was doing 15 grand a week profit. That's what he was getting. And then Lawler, I don't know what he did, and then the rest of it paid the talent. But instead of the money going to Nick, it went to them. So it was very, very advantageous for them to start their own company, which they did. And then, of course, they pulled away in Louisville. They pulled away in Evansville and Nashville with a different station. And that was the first. And I was with the company, and all of a sudden I heard they're splitting. So they sent us word that if you want to go with us, turn your notice into Nick. So he can't say we just took all the talent at one time. Give your notice. That was a legal thing. I gave my notice. Then I worked for them.
Who else gave the notice, as well as you?
But almost all of them, to tell you the truth. Tojo didn't. Jackie Fargo didn't. Because they were more old school than what I was. Nick had the reputation as the cheapest man in wrestling. He paid weekly. That's the only good thing about it. Very weekly. Weird. So, and I walked out of that territory. You asked me last week, another territory I walked out of. I walked out of that one time. Because the money just wasn't there. I mean, when you're driving up and down these roads, you're not making any money. I mean, so what? I'll get closer to the people that care about me a little bit than stay here and way off somewhere and starving to death. I wasn't going to do that. But we pulled apart. And what was the first part of this question? Did I knew that was going to do that?
You knew what? No, I may have just made up a question and I've forgotten it. Okay, I'm going to ask you something else though. How quickly did Jarrett's Tennessee promotion start outdrawing Nick Gulas' Tennessee promotion?
Oh, right away. Because he took all the Memphis talent. He took Lawler and Dundee. See, they were the two guys they had been pushing for like several years. So he took that. They went to a new TV station. I think they were on Channel 13. And the next Saturday, they were on Channel 5. And all the old time guys they had been seeing on 13 weren't there. And they were on Channel 5. Of course, they got the publicity out about this 2 weeks early. So they started tuning in Channel 5. And 13 probably lasted another month. And then Nick quit going on there because back in those days, wrestling promoters paid to be on TV. It was like an infomercial. They would buy the hour, and I don't know what they would buy it for, but it got to the point. Then Channel 5 started paying Lawler and Jarrett to put their show on. So they would put us on, and I don't know what it was. It wasn't a lot, but they started drawing. And back in those days, in 1981, when you do $30,000, that's like drawing 70,000 now. That was a lot of money. And with cheap tickets, the upstairs tickets, the upper tier, $3. But when you put 11,000 people in there, you got a lot of money in there.
What were the negotiations like to get Lance Russell and Dave Brown over? Because didn't they move channel as well, like permanently to do the news and the weather and whatever on the new channel?
Yeah, Dave Brown did. And I think both of them did, to tell you the truth, because Channel 5 got a new director. And he was trying to get Channel 5 to lead the market. And I think Lance and Dave was a weatherman. So when they got I don't know how they got on the jump, or did they do that on their own? I guess they couldn't be on another channel and still work at Channel 13. I think that's what it was. So I guess they contacted Channel 5 and said, hey, we'd like to come over, and they brought them over. It was almost, they had a myriad of things that happened for Jarrett and Lawler at that time. That was like, who would have thought that would happen? But it did. And it was like the perfect storm for them. And they just took off.
What were the wars like as far as like trying to book the same arenas or venues or whatever? Were there issues of skullduggery, trying to cancel each other's events or anything?
Oh, they were. Like, we ran the same arenas. But Vince Nick, up to that point, he couldn't run Mid-South Arena because he wouldn't draw enough. He'd lose money. And he couldn't run Louisville because of the same thing. They changed stations in Louisville, Evansville, and Nashville. So, and another hot market in those days was Lexington, Kentucky, in the Rupp Arena, which is where Kentucky basketball is. Seats 21,000 people, like the biggest arena I'd ever been in. And I think it probably is still one of the biggest arenas I've ever been in, because I've been in the Garden. I only think the Garden holds 20,000, but Rupp Arena holds 21,000. And they would do they'd do a half a house. They do 10,000 people there. And you would think Lexington, Kentucky, being a college town, wouldn't really be that hot of a wrestling town, but they had a good TV station, and that town was really, really fun to work because these was like newer fans. Lexington, Kentucky came late. It wasn't an old-time wrestling town. It became a new-time wrestling town when they put that Jarrett and Lawler tape in there. And then it took off. And I think the only way that Nick was competitive, he ran Nashville for a while. And I think he closed up about a year later. He tried to run Birmingham for a while. That was a town that Jarrett didn't want. He said he didn't want it. And I think Nick Gulas ran about another year, and then he closed up shop.